Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Born in 1957 in the small rural town of La Tuna, in the Mexican state of Sinaloa, Guzman grew up in extreme poverty with an abusive father who was himself a low-level drug grower. He was kicked out of the family home as a teenager, and with no education and no options, he turned to what surrounded him, the drug trade. By his mid-20s, he was running logistics for larger traffickers in the region. When the Guadalajara cartel collapsed in 1989 following the arrest of its leader, Guzman seized the opportunity to form his own organization, the Sinaloa Cartel. Over the following decade, he built it into the most powerful drug trafficking operation in the world, moving cocaine, heroin, meth, and marijuana into the United States through tunnels, submarines, and modified trucks. At his peak, Forbes ranked him among the world's most powerful people, estimating his net worth at over $1 billion, though some investigators believe it reached far higher. He was captured in 1993, escaped from a maximum security prison in 2001 by reportedly hiding in a laundry cart, spent 13 years as a fugitive, was captured again in 2014, escaped again in 2015 through a mile-long tunnel dug under his shower, and was finally extradited to the United States in 2017. In 2019, he was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. He is currently held at ADX Florence, a supermax facility in Colorado, the most secure prison in the United States. He was 69 years old as of 2026. His cartel continues to operate under new leadership. Pablo Escobar. Born December 1, 1949, in Rio Negro, Colombia, Escobar was the third of 7 children raised in a suburb of Medellin by a farmer father and a schoolteacher mother. He dropped out of school at 16 and began his criminal career with petty theft, stolen gravestones, and counterfeit diplomas before moving into smuggling. By the mid-1970s, he had entered the cocaine trade, and in 1976 he co-founded what became the Medellin cartel alongside the Ochoa brothers. His operation grew at a frightening pace. By the late 1980s, the Medellin cartel controlled an estimated 80% of all cocaine entering the United States. At its height, the cartel was bringing in roughly $70 million a day. His estimated net worth at the time of his death was $30 billion, placing him on the Forbes list of the world's wealthiest individuals. He ordered the killings of judges, presidential candidates, police officers, and ordinary civilians who stood in his way, and is believed responsible for thousands of deaths. In 1991, he surrendered to the Colombian government on the condition he would not be extradited, living in a luxury prison he himself designed. He escaped in 1992 and went into hiding. On December 2, 1993, one day after his 44th birthday, Colombian forces tracked him to a rooftop in Medellin and shot him dead. He lived and operated in Colombia his entire life. John Gotti. Born October 27, 1940, in the South Bronx, New York City, Gotti was the 5th of 13 children in a working-class Italian-American family. He grew up in poverty in Brooklyn and Queens, where he dropped out of school at 16 and began running with a street gang affiliated with the Gambino crime family. He rose steadily through the organization over 2 decades, building a reputation for violence and fearlessness. In December 1985, he orchestrated the assassination of then-boss Paul Castellano outside a Manhattan steakhouse, stepping over Castellano's body to take control of the family himself. Gotti became one of the most publicly visible mob bosses in American history, openly flaunting his lifestyle in expensive suits and hosting massive 4th of July block parties in Queens. The FBI surveilled him for years, but he beat 3 consecutive criminal cases, earning the nickname the Teflon Don, because nothing stuck. That changed in 1992 when his underboss Sammy, the Bull Gravano, flipped and testified against him. Gotti was convicted of murder and racketeering and sentenced to life in prison. He died of throat cancer in federal custody in 2002 at the age of 61. In his prime, he was estimated to be earning between $5 and $20 million annually. He operated out of New York, and the Gambino family, while weakened, still exists today. Al Capone. Born January 17, 1899, in Brooklyn, New York, to Italian immigrant parents, Capone was the 4th of 9 children. He dropped out of school at 14 after punching a teacher and began working for various criminal gangs in the city. His mentor was Johnny Torrio, a mid-level gangster who recognized Capone's talent for organization and violence. When Torrio relocated to Chicago and eventually handed Capone control of his operation in the mid-1920s, Capone transformed it into a sprawling criminal empire during the era of Prohibition. His Chicago outfit controlled bootlegging, gambling, and prostitution across the city, generating an estimated $100 million a year, the equivalent of over $2 billion today. He maintained relationships with the mayor, police officers, and judges, often operating in plain sight. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, in which 7 rival gang members were murdered on his orders, brought too much public attention, and the federal government came after him not for murder, but for tax evasion. He was convicted in 1931 and sentenced to 11 years in prison. He was released in 1939, already suffering from neurosyphilis, and spent his final years at his estate in Palm Beach, Florida, before dying of cardiac arrest in 1947 at age 48. His estimated net worth at peak was the equivalent of roughly $1.3 billion in today's money. Semion Mogilevich. Born June 30, 1946, in Kyiv, Ukraine, then part of the Soviet Union, Mogilevich studied economics at Lviv University before turning to crime in the 1970s, running black market schemes and small-scale fraud. He is not the kind of criminal who carries a gun in the streets. He is an organizer, a man who built one of the most sophisticated criminal enterprises in modern history almost entirely from behind a desk. After the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, he moved into the power vacuum, building a network that extended across Eastern Europe, Russia, Israel, and North America. The FBI has linked him to arms trafficking, drug trafficking, contract killings, money laundering, and a massive investment fraud scheme that defrauded thousands of investors across the United States. His estimated net worth stands at around $10 billion. The FBI placed him on its 10 most wanted fugitives list in 2009, and Interpol issued a red notice for his arrest. He was briefly detained by Russian authorities in 2008, but was released without charge. He is believed to reside openly in Moscow today under the protection of the Russian government. He is currently 80 years old. He remains one of the few figures on this list who has never faced trial for his most serious alleged crimes, and he remains at large. Griselda Blanco. Born February 15, 1943, in Cartagena, Colombia, Blanco grew up in severe poverty in Medellin and is reported to have committed her first crime, a kidnapping, at age 11. She was involved in the drug trade by her late 20s, first using her connections in Colombia and later expanding into the United States. By the mid-1970s, she had relocated to Miami and established herself as a central figure in what became known as the Cocaine Cowboys era, a period of explosive drug-fueled violence across South Florida. She worked within the Medellin cartel's broader orbit and is believed to have ordered or directly caused the deaths of more than 200 people, including contract killings carried out using motorcycle assassins, a method she is credited with popularizing in Miami's drug wars. She was known by several names: the Godmother, the Black Widow, and the Cocaine Queen of Miami. At her peak, she was reportedly making $80 million a month, with an estimated net worth of around $2 billion. She was first arrested in 1985 and sentenced to 15 years in prison, then released and deported to Colombia in 2004. In September 2012, she was shot and killed by a motorcycle gunman outside a butcher shop in Medellin, a death that mirrored the assassinations she had ordered throughout her career. She was 69 years old. Frank Lucas. Born September 9, 1930, in La Grange, North Carolina, Lucas grew up in the American South during the era of segregation and moved to Harlem, New York, as a young man in search of a better life. He worked as a driver for a local gangster named Bumpy Johnson, learning the mechanics of organized crime from the inside before eventually striking out on his own. What made Lucas different from every other drug dealer in New York at the time was his supply chain. Rather than buying heroin from the Italian Mafia, which controlled the market, he traveled directly to Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War and built his own connection with a supplier in Thailand. He reportedly smuggled the drug back to the United States hidden inside the coffins of fallen American soldiers. The quality of his product was far higher and the price far lower than anything available on the street, and he quickly dominated the heroin trade in Harlem and eventually in New York, and New Jersey. At his peak, he claimed to sell $1 million worth of heroin a day. His estimated net worth reached around $52 million. He was arrested in 1975, convicted, and eventually cooperated with authorities, helping bring down dozens of corrupt police officers. He was released, rearrested, and released again, and lived until 2019, dying at the age of 88 in New Jersey. Carlo Gambino. Born August 24, 1902, in Palermo, Sicily, Gambino emigrated to the United States in 1921 at the age of 19, slipping into the country illegally on a ship. His Sicilian mafia connections were established before he even arrived on American soil, and he quickly found his place within New York's growing organized crime world. He worked under Charles, Lucky, Luciano, and later attached himself to the Mangano family, learning patience and political cunning in an environment where men who moved too fast often died. Over the following decades, he rose slowly and deliberately, avoiding the spotlight, biding his time, and cultivating loyalty. By 1957, he had taken control of the family that now bears his name and built it into the most powerful of New York's 5 families. He was so careful and so difficult to prosecute that the FBI spent years unable to make a case against him. His estimated net worth at his peak was in the hundreds of millions of dollars. The character of Vito Corleone in The Godfather was partly inspired by Gambino, the aging patriarch who ruled through quiet authority rather than open violence. He died of a heart attack at his home in October 1976, at age 74, never having been convicted of a serious crime. He lived and operated in New York his entire life, and the Gambino crime family continues to function today. Amado Carrillo Fuentes. Born December 17, 1956, in Sinaloa, Mexico, Fuentes came from a family already involved in drug trafficking. He learned the trade from an uncle who was a significant trafficker in his own right, and rose through the ranks of the Guadalajara cartel before eventually taking control of the Juarez cartel in the early 1990s. What separated him from others was his method of transport. He operated a private fleet of more than 20 Boeing 727 jetliners to move massive cocaine shipments from Colombia into Mexico and across the border into the United States, an operation so large and so efficient that the DEA named him the most powerful drug trafficker of his era. His nickname was Lord of the Skies. His net worth was estimated at $25 billion, rivaling Pablo Escobar's fortune. He operated from Ciudad Juarez in northern Mexico, just across the border from El Paso, Texas. Under his leadership, the Juarez cartel temporarily became the dominant trafficking organization in Mexico. In 1997, facing increasing pressure from authorities and rivals, Fuentes attempted to change his appearance through extensive plastic surgery. He died on July 4, 1997, shortly after the operation, at just 40 years old. The cause reported as surgical complications, though some investigators suspected foul play. He never faced trial for his crimes. Dawood Ibrahim. Born December 26, 1955, in Khed, Maharashtra, India, Ibrahim grew up in a working-class family in Mumbai. His father was a police constable. By his early 20s, he had become a key figure in the Mumbai underworld, running extortion, smuggling, and contract killing operations through an organization known as D Company. Over the following decades, he expanded his reach far beyond organized crime. In 1993, he was linked to the coordinated bombings across Mumbai that killed over 250 people and wounded hundreds more, an attack tied to retaliatory motives following sectarian riots. The United States designated him a global terrorist in 2003, the same year the Indian government formally labeled him one of the country's most wanted individuals. The reward for information leading to his capture has been set at $25 million. His estimated net worth is placed at around $6 to $7 billion, derived from drug trafficking, arms dealing, and criminal enterprises spanning multiple continents. He is widely believed to be living in Karachi, Pakistan, though Pakistan has consistently denied his presence on its territory. He is currently 70 years old. He remains at large, and D Company continues to operate. He has never been brought to trial despite decades of international pursuit. Salvatore Riina. Born November 16, 1930, in Corleone, Sicily, a village whose name would later become synonymous with the mafia worldwide. Riina grew up in poverty in the mountains of western Sicily and committed his first murder as a teenager. He was sentenced to life in prison in absentia in 1969 for multiple murders, but had already gone underground, living as a fugitive inside Sicily itself for more than 20 years. During that time, he rose to become the most feared boss in the history of the Sicilian Mafia, earning the nickname The Beast for his willingness to kill anyone, including rival bosses, judges, prosecutors, politicians, and their families. He launched a systematic campaign to eliminate the Italian state's most effective anti-mafia figures, including legendary judges Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, both assassinated in 1992 in bombings that shocked Italy and the world. Riina was finally captured in Palermo in January 1993 after 23 years as a fugitive. Authorities were reportedly stunned to find he had been hiding in plain sight within the city. He received multiple life sentences at trial and never apologized for any of his actions. His net worth was never precisely determined, though the Sicilian Mafia's financial reach extended into billions. He died in prison on November 17, 2017, one day after his 87th birthday. He operated entirely within Italy. Charles Lucky Luciano, born November 24, 1897, in Lercrafritti, Sicily, Luciano emigrated to the United States with his family as a child and grew up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. He was arrested for the first time at age 10 for shoplifting and never returned to school. By his mid-teens, he was running a protection racket, and by his 20s, he was one of the most connected young criminals in New York, building relationships that crossed ethnic and gang boundaries at a time when that was deeply unusual. He worked alongside Jewish gangsters Meyer Lansky and Bugsy Siegel, and together they helped reshape what American organized crime looked like. In 1931, Luciano orchestrated the coordinated murders of the old guard mafia bosses who stood in the way of modernization, a violent reorganization known as the Castellamarese War, and emerged as the most powerful figure in American crime. He created the Commission, a governing body for the 5 families of New York that set the structure for organized crime across the country for decades. He was convicted in 1936 on charges related to prostitution and sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison, though he was released in 1946 and deported to Italy in exchange for alleged cooperation during World War II. He spent the rest of his life in Italy and died of a heart attack in Naples in January 1962 at age 64. His estimated net worth in today's value is placed at around $500 million. He is widely regarded as the founder of the modern American Mafia,